welcome back to my channel. This is Daniel with drdataservices.com. In today's video, I wanted to take a deeper dive into some of the macro variables in SAS and how you can use those in your project. So we'll kind of touch base on the previous video on the basics of macro variables and then kind of go into the more advanced steps that you can use to create macro variables and put them into your tables and outputs. So what this is going to look like today, I just wanted to quickly show you what we went over last time, which was the basic let statement here, where your %let name of the macro variable equals, and then whatever it is you want that macro variable to produce. So last time we created a little story, and it produced out in the output. And which way you would do that is by %put and then calling the macro variable, always using the semicolon at the end of every line. But today I wanted to show you how far we can take these macro variables. Here's a few more options you can use in your projects to help make your projects more advanced. Specifically, we're going to be using today the data null, and we're using the call Symput to create a macro variable today. So for this particular macro variable, what I'm doing here is I'm creating a macro variable called date now. And this is the basic structure of what it should look like. So it should be call Symput bracket single quotation, your macro variable name, comma, put, and then for this particular one, I'm using a date function. So to date, open and close parentheses, is today's date, and then the date 9 period is a specific date format, which is, I believe it's month, day, month, year. And we'll see that in a little bit when I call the macro using the %put. So if I wanted to just simply run this, this particular one right here will create today's date. So date now will create today's date. Yesterday, the macro variable called yesterday here will use today's date and then subtract 1 from that. So you can see that here, right here. So it'll create today's date minus 1, and that'll be yesterday's date. So I'll go ahead and run this, and then we'll take a look at, just by running this, I'm not producing an output yet. I'm just running the code so it's in memory. So let's go ahead and take a look at the output, though, of what will be produced. So I'm going to say, let's take a look at date now, which is today's date, and let's see what it's producing. So this produces today's date, which is the 2-digit date, the 3-digit November, or the 3-digit month, and the 4-digit year. So that's what this is what it's producing. And then let's take a look at the next one, which is yesterday. And we can't forget the way to call the macro variable, which is the and symbol. Now let's go ahead and run this and see what it produces. So as you can see, this produces yesterday's date. So today is the 4th. Yesterday was the 3rd. Now there's different ways you can use this in your data. For instance, if I wanted to create a table and create a variable. So let's do, I'm a fan of proc SQL, so I'm going to do that. So create table. I'm going to say test. All right, so I just created this table. It's a proc SQL table. We're calling it test, today's date, and we're pulling all the variables from which I just added off camera is BRFIS data. This data comes from the CDC. I'll link that data up in the description below if you want to use it and follow along. This is the proc import statement I'm using. It's very simple data. I believe it's on smoking questions, cigarette smoking questions. So if you want to know more about that, you can find the link down below in the description. But this is the data set we'll be using. I'll go ahead and quickly show you what that looks like. All right, so here's the data. There's a year, variable, state, smoking, smoke days, smoke some days, former smoker, never smoked, and location. So that's just the data. We're going to be using the macro variable here. And I'm going to just run this whole thing real quick, and we'll see what the name here, the name of the table comes up as. Because remember, we use the date now here, and this will produce today's date. The yesterday will produce yesterday's date. So let's go ahead and run this table, see what the table name produces. All right, so as we can see, this table is now showing the name as test underscore and then today's date. So the macro variable can be used in multiple places. So let's try another example. Let's try creating a variable. So we'll do you'll see use yesterday's date right here. Okay. And let's make this into a variable. Let's call it data run date. All right, so now what we're doing here is we're pulling all the data from the table like before. We're calling this test table and today's date. And we're also creating a variable called yesterday, or from the yesterday macro variable, and that variable will now be called data run date. So let's go ahead and run this. All right, so let's go ahead and start and run this. I forgot the double quotations around this, so it'll run properly. One thing to note on about quotations and macro variables is if it's a single quotation, it will not run. So if you have a macro variable within single quotations, it will not run. So you need to use, when using macro variables, you need to use double quotations so that it will run properly. So let's go ahead and give this a try and see what happens. All right, so we have our test, today's date, November 5th, using that macro variable. And then here is, scroll all the way down to the end here, November 4th. This is a new variable now that we created using a macro variable that was generated from using the Symput code up here. So that's just a couple interesting ways you can use macro variables in your data. All right, guys, now that we got that example down, let's go ahead and create another macro variable. And this one will be, let's call it month start. And it'll be whatever today's date is minus 30. So let's call this month start like that, and then we'll subtract 30 instead of 1. All right, and this will be the beginning of the reporting period. So let's call this, we'll do the same thing over here. Remember our double quotations while calling macro variables. in string. So let's go ahead and do this right there. And we'll call this as data start. Okay, so we should have two variables off macro variables. So we have yesterday's date, that'll be data run date, and then month start as data start. So the nice thing about using macro variables like this is you can make code more templatized, if that's a word. It's not a word, but it's you can make it more standardized, being able to create one code and be able to run it multiple times at any time. It'll still produce the same outcome. So for this, we're going to produce yesterday's date, and we're going to produce 30 days from today's date. So minus 30 days from today's date. Let's go ahead and take a look at this and see what this produces now. Uh-oh, what did I do? All right. Oh, I forgot my as. There we go. And this should not even be there. There we go. Let's try that again. Okay, so at the very end here, we should see we got data run date, data start. Oh, look what happened here. So what happened here is, because I haven't rerun the macro, this is going to show up. So this is an important thing to remember, that when you're structuring your program, you want to have the macro variables being generated first or being run first, so you can later call them in your macro or in your program. So you're going to see this change in a second. So let's go ahead and rerun this now that we've updated it. And then let's run this again, and it should change. Okay, see guys, now it changed to October 6th, which is 30 days from today's, is minus 30 days from today's date. So important thing to remember is that you need to structure your program in a way that your macro variables are up towards the top of the program, and that you're calling them throughout the program subsequent from the original creation of the macro variable. So I hope that's helpful, guys. I think we'll end it here, but if you have questions and comments, please leave them down below. Please subscribe and like to my channel. That's super helpful, and I'm just trying to get this information out there and hopefully make you a better SAS programmer. So any way to help me out like that is really great. Have an awesome day, guys. Bye.